Okay. I'd like to speak about this evening a very important topic, as we say, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Let me begin. There's a Gemara Rosh Hashanah that says as follows: why is it that we don't say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah nor on Yom Kippur? If you pay attention to the prayer services, there's a piece that's there in every other holiday, but missing on both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and that piece is Hallel. The typical songs, the typical celebration, the typical thanking Hashem is missing on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And the Gemara asks, why isn't it there? Why isn't it present? It says in the Gemara that this question was actually asked by the Malachei Asharis. The angels asked this very question to Hashem. Says the Gemara, Ribono shel Olam Hashem, mipnei ma im Yisrael omrim shira lefanecha Rosh Hashanah. Why is it that the Jewish nation do not sing praise? Why is it that they don't sing Hallel on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Hashem said back, Efshir, is it possible Melech Yoshev al Kisei Din, that a king is going to sit on the throne of judgment? Is it possible that a king sits on the throne and judges the people, V'omrim Shira, and they're going to sing Sifrei Chaim v'Sifrei Chaim Pesuchim Lefanav, the books of life and the books of death are being decided, they're being written in, it's inappropriate to sing. So this is the conversation. The Malachim asked the question, the angels asked, why is it that the Jewish nation don't sing Shira? And Hashem answers, it's inappropriate because the books of life and death are open, meaning each individual's life is being decided on these days, and it's not appropriate to sing praise, to sing songs of thanksgiving is too joyful. What I'd like to do this evening is focus on both the question and the answer. Now let's focus one point for a minute. Malachei Asharis are angels. An angel has no physical manifestation, therefore is not blocked by any physicality. An angel sees things with absolute total clarity, with an absolute total understanding. And their question is rather one that is very wise. Number two, the Gemara brings this. So I'd like to focus for a minute on first, what was their question? Why is it appropriate? Why is it proper for a Jewish person to want to sing Shira, to want to sing praise to God on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? If you think about it, it's a rather solemn day, a rather serious day. It doesn't sound like the kind of day you should be dancing in the aisles singing. You don't say one should. And I'd like to focus on what I believe is the answer to that. And that is, if a person understood the global issues that are decided on Rosh Hashanah and sealed on Yom Kippur, they would be astounded. The amount of the issues being decided, the amount of, on a very simple level, which nation goes to war, which goes to famine, on a personal level, which people live, which people die, but there's so many myriad issues that are determined on Rosh Hashanah, sealed on Yom Kippur, that if a person wanted to know the extent of the issues, all you have to do is read the headlines of the New York Times. But don't read the headlines of the New York Times on the day of Rosh Hashanah. Read the headlines of the New York Times for each and every day of that year and know and understand that all of those issues, the global issues, the catastrophes that were supposed to happen, the calamities that didn't occur, the various terrorist attacks, or the things that were supposed to or didn't happen, all of those things were written on the previous Rosh Hashanah and sealed on Yom Kippur. And I'll share with you an interesting thought that the Chazal says. He says people make a mistake. They're astounded by people's wisdom. They look at a fellow who invents something new. Imagine for me that Thomas Edison spends countless hours, weeks, maybe months, discovering wishes, certain time periods, certain technological advances to come to the fore, and there's a certain progression in the world. At a certain time of the world history, Hashem decided what it means in a plain, simple terms is if there's going to be a cure for cancer, if there's going to be a new development, if your iPod is actually going to show you videos roll in the world, you see typically we look at Hashem, we look at God as being very, very far, way up in heaven. The reality is that one of the basics of Jewish thought is Hashem is present right here, dramatically, intimately involved in our lives on a daily basis, involved in all of the decisions, all of the events of man's life. And that understanding should bring us, I believe in Hashem, and I'm certainly in the category of one who's pleased when I see my King, my Creator, being honored. And when a Jew sits back and understands that on this day, Rosh Hashanah, and specifically on Yom Kippur, Hashem decides all of these issues. And not just He decides all these issues, Hashem comes to the fore and sits as the shofet, as a judge. If I understand what goes on, it brings a person to say, wow, this is astounding. All of the issues that are being decided, all of the fates of mankind that are being determined is so awe-inspiring that it should bring a person to a sense of joy, a sense of wanting to sing out praise, because it brings a person to understand God's involvement, God's control, and God's might. Easier to feel the presence of Hashem during these days than it is during the rest of the year. And a person's able to understand things. A person's able to understand the extent of God's involvement, the extent of the issues that He determines, and that brings a person to a tremendous sense of joy, of simcha, real, pure joy, because Hashem is being glorified, and that should fill me with a desire to sing. Yet, Hashem answered back to Malchus Hashoretz that even though it's true, it is correct that one should have that desire, one should have that feeling in his heart, there's also a certain temperance to that. The Sifrei Chaim, the Sifrei Movis, the open meaning, it's true. On a global sense, it's fantastic, all the issues of the world that are being determined. But all of humanity's fate is being decided. I too am a human, and that should temper my joy because there's a certain understanding that I am being judged. And my fate, and that means whether I will live, whether I'll die, whether I'll be healthy, whether I'll be well, whether I'll have great success or not, whether I'll have a year of tranquility and blessings, or I'll have a year of suffering. And suffering, my friends, doesn't only mean physical suffering. It means oftentimes mental suffering, anguish, pain, all of the package of living in this world we live in. All of that is decided, all of that is determined, and hence it's inappropriate for me to sing. Why? Because while I sit back and see the majesty of Hashem being revealed, and I have a sense of, wow, that's astounding, and that's joy, but that joy is held in check to some extent, and the two feelings should be there in a Jew's heart. Now, with that as an introduction to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I have an important observation to share. And that is, we understand this, and we all know this. So if we know this, and we understand this, you would expect, I have things that I need. I need my health, I need my well-being, I need success in so many areas. There are so many issues that are being decided. You would assume that we would be there in shul, certainly on Yom Kippur, sitting there with tears in our eyes, really begging, imploring, entreating Hashem, please help. And while the reality is that we try, and we do take davening more seriously, and we come to shul, I think the reality is a bit different than that. We try, but kind of the mind wanders, and I got tests coming up, and I got finals and exams, and what about my boyfriend or my girlfriend or whatever else is in my immediate surrounding. And I think that oftentimes we don't quite get it. And I'd like to share with you why I believe we don't get it. And I think there are two primary reasons why it's difficult, even though we understand this, why it's difficult to daven appropriately on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I'll share with you what that is. The first reason I believe is quite simple, and that is in our generation we lack nothing. If you think about the fact that in our generation we have so much, it's quite difficult to pray. I'll share with you an interesting thought. I have a friend of mine who's a den zakunim. That means his father had him when he was an older man, and his father was a rabbi in the late 20s, early 30s in New York City. And his father told him that every Erev Rosh Chodesh benching, he'd hear women from the other side of the Mechitza crying. And he said, why? It wasn't that there was such big Yerushalayim, it wasn't that they were so filled with fear of heaven, but he said, he would hear women from the other side of the pizza crying because when they got up to the part of asking Hashem for parnasa, asking Hashem for sustenance, they began crying. Why? Because they really needed a year of blessing, they needed a month of blessing, and they sat there crying because they needed. And that's an interesting thought. The reality is that one of the great blessings of our generation is that we don't need. And when a person doesn't need, a person doesn't feel a real sense of need, it's more difficult to pray, it's more difficult to reach out to God, it's more difficult to stand there in shul and say, Hashem, I need help, I need help. Those words are a lot more difficult to come by if in fact you're very wealthy, if in fact you have a lot. I'll share with you one more interesting story. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was a Rav in Yerushalayim before World War I. And he lived in Israel throughout his entire life. And in 67, when the Arabs were bombing, later in 73 during the Yom Kippur War, and during the later wars, his students noticed that throughout the battle, throughout the bombs dropping, he was always calm. The man always kept a tremendous sense of equanimity. And one time they went over to him and said, Rosh Hashiva, how is it possible? The bombs are bursting, people are dying in the streets, how is it possible if you remain so calm? And he said, you don't understand. I lived a very different life than you did. I grew up in Yerushalayim, I grew up in Jerusalem in the 20s, and he said these words, he said, I don't remember once going to bed not being hungry. And the reality is, if you're brought up with suffering, if you're brought up with need, you have a different sense of life, and you have a different sense of your dependence on God, and you pray differently. Thank God, we live in a very different generation. We live in a time of plenty, we live in a time where people have such abundance. I don't know a person my age or younger who ever went to bed hungry. And I mean really hungry. Because again, thank God we have a tremendous, tremendous amount, and because we have a tremendous amount, it's difficult for us to understand that we need. Now, this understanding can come to a person if you work on it. And I'll share with you an interesting insight that the Granat shared with us. The Granat was pre-World War II, a famous Rosh Hashiva, famous rabbi, was once approached by a certain gentleman. This gentleman came over to him and said the following words. He said, Rabbi, I don't understand. We say in the words of Slichos, Kedolim u'kerashim dafachni v'losecha. God, we knock on your door as poor men. And the Granat, he said, I don't understand. How could I say those words? How could I say, God, I turn to you as a poor, impoverished man? I'm a wealthy individual. I'm rich. I have 500 men in my employ. How could I turn to you, to God, and say, I'm a poor man? It's not true. Granat said, you're making one mistake. He said, you're assuming that because last Rosh Hashanah, Hashem decided this year you should be wealthy, you're assuming that this Rosh Hashanah, God is going to make the same decision. But the one mistake you're making is there are no guarantees. And if you understood that this Rosh Hashanah right now, that issue is being judged, whether you will continue to keep your great wealth or you will not, is being decided, is being judged right now. If you understood that, you would understand that you are Kedolim u'kerashim, you're a poor man. The reason you don't understand that is you assume there's a guarantee, you assume what was will be, and my friends, I think that is the answer to the first problem that we have. The first problem why it's difficult for us to pray on Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur is because we have so much. I think the Granat gives us a very important answer. And that answer is there are no guarantees in life. Life has a very interesting and funny way of turning. You know, there are people who get sick. People who are very intelligent, very capable, very talented, find themselves in a place they never intended to be. And if you're not quite sure, I'll give you a little exercise. Go to the hospital and do a little survey. So ask people, did you intend to be here? If you're not really sure about this, go to Sloan Kettering. Go to Sloan Kettering and interview the patients and say, sir, 6 months ago, did you intend to have colon cancer? Did you intend to be terminally ill? Was this in your plan of life? You're not going to get a yes, because the reality is that life takes its turns, things happen, and very put together people much like you and I, end up getting sick. And even, I dare say, if you're not quite sure about this one, you could open the obituary section, people die. Old people, young people, middle-aged people, tall people, short people, fat people, skinny people. It really doesn't matter, because it really happens to all sorts and all walks of people. And if I understood that issue for real, in a very real way, is being judged, meaning whether I live or die, whether I'll be healthy or well, is being decided, that would bring me to a certain understanding that I am quite needy. And if that's too remote, I have a more simple observation to make. If you start studying life, you'll find that there are people who make a lot of money, and there are people who don't make that much money. And typically you assume that, oh, it must be a brilliant individual. What a brilliant, brilliant fellow who makes a fortune of money, and the guy who doesn't really make it is whatever, he's a low yitzlach, he's not particularly successful. Talk to people who went into a very good field 15, 20 years ago. They began, when computer was first beginning to come out, they began programming, and they were literally, these were the founding fathers of programming, and they got themselves a cradle-to-grave job with great benefits of programming computers. And then they found, some 5 years ago, that the entire industry was moved to India. And if you're not sure, call up Dell and ask for the tech support there. You can't speak the same language, because there's no such thing anymore in this country as writing programs largely over here. Why? Because it's so much cheaper to do it overseas. Now, you could be a very intelligent person, find yourself somewhere years and years into your career, and your career itself is down the tubes. Here's another one. Anyone who was foolish enough 10 years ago to invest in real estate, nuts. I know people who bought buildings in the South Bronx. I know people who bought co-ops in the Lower East Side. They were idiots. Everyone knew they were idiots. Meantime, they're very, very wealthy today. Why? Because you and I didn't know it, and they didn't really know it either, but suddenly real estate takes a dramatic turn. You know anybody in the mortgage industry? It's a very interesting thing, the mortgage industry. 10 years ago, it began to climb like a rocket, and I know people who are making money hand over fist. Just about 9 months ago, it took a dive, and the same people, went from making some $350,000 a year to making not a fraction of that. Intelligent, well-versed, articulate, put-together people. When you quickly decide is that things happen in life. Smart people, not so smart people, regular people, not so regular people, but mostly people like you and I have things happen to them. And there's a certain reality that hits you at a certain point that you realize that you and I have no control over that. And when that hits you, that's time to begin understanding exactly this concept. That those issues are opened up, those issues are decided on Rosh Hashanah and sealed on Yom Kippur. During these 10 days, that's the deciding period. And when I stand there Yom Kippur in Shul, I know and understand that my future is being determined. And that future means all of the issues of my life, including down to the minutiae, from the great, great, important, grand issues, down to the minute, small, tiny details. They're determined and decided. And the reality is, all of that is decided on Rosh Hashanah. I have a mashal, a parable that I think well sums this up. A number of years ago, my wife and I were driving when our oldest daughter was then about 3, and we'd strap her in the car seat in the back. We were driving on 81 North. It was a cold winter's day, and about 5 o'clock it starts getting dark, and a few minutes after that it starts snowing. First, cute little snowflakes coming down, nothing to worry about. Then it starts coming down heavier and heavier. Now, if you know 81 North, it's a 2-lane highway, and there's no shoulder. So I'm driving, and it's getting heavier and heavier, and I realize there's no way. I can't turn off, but I can't go forward, and all of a sudden it happens. The car slides out, and I just feel the car just rotate. And I see the car going into a spin, and out of my left window, I see the tractor trailer coming. And I say to myself, there is nothing I can do. I have no control. There's nothing I can do to stop this from happening. We keep spinning. Somehow the tractor trailer passes. We end up spinning out on the embankment. Thank God no one was touched. I look back, and my daughter, who was 3 years old, was still sound asleep in the car seat. And it brought me to a certain recognition. I just lived through probably the most harrowing, most frightful event of my life, and my daughter was sound asleep. And my friends, I think for a lot of us, that's how we go through Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The issues are decided. The gravity of the issues are tremendous. Our entire future, our life is decided. And we're like that little child in the car seat, sound asleep. Oh, no, I can't really get into davening. Yeah, it's a long day. I got lots of time. Yom Kippur is a long day. I'm fasting. I'm not going to push myself to really think about it and really daven. But that reality, if I understand that life is serious and life has its ups, life has its downs, but in the end of the day, much of what I want, much of what I need is being decided, that should bring a person to a tremendous understanding, and that should bring a person to daven, to pray in a very different way. But I think there's a second problem. There's a second reason why it's difficult for a person to really pray appropriately in our days, and I'll share with you what that is. When I was, a number of years ago, and I may be dating myself with this one, but when O.J. was on trial, now if you studied probably in ancient history, that mockery of justice when O.J. Simpson was being tried, I made it a point to be in front of a TV when they read the verdict. Now you have to understand, he had the dream team, he had Dershowitz, he had everyone and anyone defending him. And at a certain point, the jury foreman stands up to read the verdict. And the jury foreman stands to read the verdict. OJ is sitting there gripping the table. He was white as a ghost. You could see him just trembling. The jury foreman stands up and says, "We find him innocent." And the man just, wow, came to life. That is verdict. That is judgment in this world. There's a time of anxiety, a time of nervousness, a time of deliberation, and then the verdict is read. And in this world, that's judgment. The judgment that we experience on Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur is somewhat different. You see, the verdict is decided, but we don't know it. And we'll leave Yom Kippur at night, maybe the next day, feeling good, feeling happy, feeling ready to take on the new year, but we don't know what the verdict was. And I'll share with you what I call a Musar exercise. If you'd like to really understand the judgment, understand the din, it's a very simple thing. If you daven in a synagogue that's large enough, come to understand one simple concept. If you look around the room, no one understands that likely within that room there's at least one person who has an X on his head. What that means in plain language is likely there's one person who has decided on that Yom Kippur that they weren't going to make it. There might be also another person, a couple couldn't have children for many, many years, and there was a verdict that they should have children. Another person who for years struggled with making a living, and a verdict that have a totally different year. But if you daven in a large enough shul, if you're part of a large enough community, no one understands that there are many, many verdicts that are determined, are decided. We don't see it, and therefore it's difficult, but they are determined. The Steipler, if you know the great Rosh Hashiva, the Steipler was once, he lived in Israel, and especially when he was in his 80s, people used to come to him on a regular basis, to the extent that he would be sitting at his desk and his whole living room would be filled with people waiting for blessings, waiting for advice, waiting for all different issues. And the story is told that he rarely looked up. One time a man walked in for a blessing, and the Steipler looks up over to the door and says, "Russia, wicked one, get out! Get out! Get out, Russia!" The man who walked in turned white. He didn't know what happened. He ran out the door. A few hours later, somebody comes into the Steipler and says, "Rosh Hashiva, we just have to tell you, the person that the Steipler called a wicked man is not so wicked. He was just in a car accident, and everyone in the car died except that individual." The Steipler said, "Don't you understand? When he walked in, the angel of death walked in with him. I saw it. The only way I could save him, if you embarrass a person, it's like you kill him. That was the only way I could save him." And then once upon a time, were people like the Steipler who could see the Malach HaMavis walk in with an individual. But you and I don't. We daven in shul, and we're happy. Even on Yom Kippur, we're supposed to be happy, and we're supposed to have bitachon, we're supposed to have faith in God's mercy, and we have a sense of it's a yontif. But the reality is that there's a judgment going on. We don't see the verdict, but it's written. And every individual in that shul, every individual in every shul, every inhabitant of this planet's fate is decided down to the minutiae. And that should bring a person to a very different cognition, a very different understanding of what the day is about. And again, these two difficulties, that number one, I feel is a guarantee. Look, I'm young. Come on, I'm a young person. I'm healthy. I'm well. I'm not going to get sick. I'm not going to die. That's not going to happen to a guy. Besides, I'm talented. I'm put together. I can make a living. I don't need help. I'm going to find the right person at the right time. He's going to work out. I'm going to have kids who are going to be going the right way. Everything is going to be perfect because I have it all planned out. But if you look around, you see it doesn't always work that way. You don't always find the right person when you're ready. And she or he doesn't always say yes. And you don't always have the kind of kids you want when you want. And life in the real world is not always so rosy. And it's at that point when you get it, you say to yourself, I finally understand. There are no guarantees. There are no guarantees. And these issues are decided, determined on Rosh Hashanah. And I'll give you a little exercise that the Kol Chayor, one of the great Musar works, shares. He says, if you want to get into davening, if you want to make this a meaningful Yom Kippur, he says people usually take the wrong tack. They come to shul ready and they say to themselves, oh my goodness, I have a year ahead of me. I need so much help. There's so many issues I need God's support with. There's so many things I better get in my mind and bring to the forefront of my understanding. Says the Kol Chayor, that's very difficult and rarely does it work. If you want to feel the judgment, he says do something else. Look backwards. Review the past year. Look at all the interesting events that just sort of happened, the people that you met, the people that just sort of came into your life, the things that worked out, the things that didn't work out. Suddenly, this sort of situation occurred, suddenly this one didn't. Review your entire year and then do the following. Go back to the previous Rosh Hashanah and know that all of those decisions were written on the previous Rosh Hashanah, sealed on Yom Kippur. The fate of that year was determined during that time period. Then, once you have that understanding, now come to Yom Kippur now stand in front of Hashem with the understanding that this coming year is also decided. And this is something that with work, with contemplation, with preparing, changes a person's understanding. And when a person does it, they come to a very, very different appreciation for davening. And I'll share with you something. This may be a little hard to hear, but every once in a while your world is kind of shaken up. In Muncie, 2 years ago, there was a 9-year-old girl who was buying ice cream from an ice cream truck. Behind the ice cream truck was a woman. The woman pulled around the side of the ice cream truck, didn't see the 9-year-old girl, killed her. Terrible tragedy, and the community was devastated by a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, a simple observation. Could you imagine the mother of that child if on the previous Rosh Hashanah she knew that that issue is being decided? Her 9-year-old, whether she'll live or die, is being decided. Could you imagine the type of prayers she would be praying? The tears, the entreats, the begging, imploring, Hashem, please have mercy. Now you and I don't know whether that prayer would have made the difference or wouldn't, but knowing and understanding that my fate, my family's fate, my children, if I'm married, certainly my brothers, my sisters, my uncles, my aunts, my entire community's fate is up in the air, being decided, and there are no guarantees. People, regular, good, healthy people, have all kinds of things happen to them, and that understanding that there are no guarantees, and I can change the judgment. Hashem waits for our prayers, Hashem waits for our reaching out, and that can change the prayer. I think that understanding could dramatically change a person's davening, where a person prays on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur. Especially on Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur is a day when a person is able to feel things that we're not able to feel during the rest of the year. Yom Kippur is a day when a person can look back at their life and ask themselves that key question: what am I doing that's right? What am I doing that I'm not so happy with? Am I really happy with the direction of my life? Am I really on track with where I want to be? You see, I believe that's probably the most important question a Jew can ask themselves on Yom Kippur. Is my life the kind of life I want it to be? And Yom Kippur is also the day when a person can make the decisions to change their life. And there may be areas that I'm quite pleased with, quite happy with, and I intend to strengthen those, but there may be issues, there may be areas, there may be entire behaviors that I'm really not pleased with, and I may want to change directions. And Yom Kippur is one of the best days to do that, because during the fast, when you're in shul, there's a certain clarity of understanding, a certain clarity of mind that a person has. I think there's a tremendous understanding from this discussion between the angels and God. What the angel said is, look at this day, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, what a wondrous day. It's a day that a Jew should feel close to his Creator. It's a day that a Jew can feel things that he can't feel during the rest of the year. It's a day that a Jew can understand the enormous amount of issues that God decides and determines. And that should fill a Jew with tremendous joy. I should have a sense of joy, and I should wish to say shir, I should wish to sing out praise. But also, there's God's answer that the books of life, the books of death are open. It's inappropriate. Inappropriate to sing. You should feel joy, but there's also a certain temperance, there's a certain understanding. My future is being judged, my entire future is being decided, and that should temper my joy. But both of those emotions exist: great fear, great joy, commingled and commixed. And the key to understanding is to understand that there are no guarantees in life, and the key to understanding is that the verdict is decided and determined whether we see it or not. Like my child asleep in the car seat, sometimes we walk into Yom Kippur sound asleep. But even if we didn't prepare much, you could wake up on Yom Kippur, you could think about these things, and you could bring yourself to a totally different understanding and a totally different recognition of what you want out of life. I'd like to close with a story that happened to a friend of mine, interestingly enough. His name is Chaim Trapp. Chaim Trapp was learning in Kolo, and then Chofetz Chaim in Forest Hills, and they had made up that his sister-in-law and his brother-in-law were going to come to their house for Shabbos. We planned a few weeks before. They were all going to spend the Shabbos together at Chaim's house. That Thursday night, Chaim's wife gets a call from her sister. My husband's tired, he doesn't want to come, we're not going to come. Chaim's wife says, but we cooked, you can't not come, back and forth, do come, don't come, finally, you know what, I'll tell you what, I cooked the food already, let's all go to your apartment, fine. So they all decided, instead of spending the Shabbos at Chaim's apartment, they took the food and they all spent the Shabbos at the brother-in-law's apartment over there. Okay. Now, Chaim described to me something very interesting. He said when he came to the house on Shabbos, he saw there was a book on the table called Who by Fire. Now, if you've ever seen this book, it's a moving but very unfortunate story about a woman who was living in Israel. The house that she was in, the apartment she was in, caught fire. She ran out. She realized that her children were left behind. She ran back and saved the children. But because of that, she suffered burns on 80% of her body, and it describes the horrific recuperation process. It was a very, very moving, very, very sad but empowering book. Anyway, Chaim said he couldn't understand why, but he couldn't put the book down. The whole Shabbos he's reading it cover to cover until he finished it. Mincha time, he goes into the yeshiva to walk into the yeshiva, and he gets there, and he starts davening Mincha, and as soon as he walks into the Beis Midrash, he looks around, he sees that everybody's looking at him. Doesn't think much about it. He davens TheShmuz. After TheShmuz, he takes a few steps back, looks up, and he sees all eyes are upon him. But I with a lot of what's going on? He doesn't understand what's happening. After davening, he goes up to a friend of his and he says, what's the story? Why is everybody staring at me? Oh, you didn't hear? No, hear what? Oh, sorry everyone to tell you this, but last night your apartment burned down. What had happened was about 2 a.m., the house didn't really burn down, it erupted into flame. It was a 3-family house, and in fact there was a family in there that were, many of the children were killed, his wife, it was a terrible, terrible fire. But it just so happens to be that Chaim and his family were not there. His wife, his kids, he were not there. And then he understood that conversation Thursday night was the pivotal point of whether he'd be there or not. You see, his wife having that conversation, come to my apartment, look back, forth, we're going to be there, was the pivotal point that changed his future, but that wasn't the determinant. You see, that issue was determined on the previous Rosh Hashanah. And we say these words, we say it's written on Rosh Hashanah, sealed in Yom Kippur, mi ba'ish, mi b'mayim, who will die, not just how many people will die, not just how many people will be born, but which people will fill those spots and which exact methods they'll come about. And he understood that there was a message. The reason why he was drawn like a magnet to that book was not without cause, but Hashem was sending him a very clear message that he was being saved. On the previous Rosh Hashanah, he was given a decree of salvation, of being saved, but not just being saved. Hashem was telling him exactly, see it, feel it, understand it. And every once in a while in your life, those kind of things happen. And when they happen, whether it's big deal things like life-changing things or even small things, you have to think about it, you have to look at it, and you have to say to yourself, on Rosh Hashanah it's written, on Yom Kippur it's signed, exactly my fate. And with that understanding, you walk into shul on Yom Kippur, and you daven, you pray appropriately as a Jew should. You close your eyes, and you speak in your mother tongue to Hashem, and you ask for all the various many needs that we have. And again, in your mother tongue. The machzor is very important, and try to say the words in the machzor as much as you can, but there's a part of prayer that becomes much more real, and is much more real when you say it in your mother tongue, and you ask Hashem for all of the various needs that you have. You turn to Hashem and you say as follows, I don't claim to be any big shot, I don't claim to warrant anything. I come to you as a child to a father, and I beg, please help me, I need this, 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 and this. And if a Jew comes sincerely, and a Jew comes with real, earnest requests, Hashem answers those requests, and Hashem helps. And Hakadosh Baruch Hu grant us much success to be able to feel this, to be able to put this into practice, and to be able to live through a very meaningful experience of Yom Kippur.
Another question?
Yeah, question.
Can we change the decree in the middle of the year somehow?
That's a very good question. Now, the answer to that is yes, but it's much more difficult. You see, it's written on Rosh Hashanah, that's sort of like in ink. It's sealed in Yom Kippur. Between that time, it's easier to change. Once it's sealed, it still can be changed, but it's much more difficult. So if you find yourself February, when something happens and you realize you're in big trouble, it's a very good idea to go to shul and pray, or stand there and pray, because you still can change it, but it's more difficult. It's a lot easier before the decision is actually made.
What needs to be done to change it? Different spiritual level? Or?
Well, it's kind of funny because there are different systems. Sometimes, ironically enough, sometimes it's only an issue of asking. the Mos, Sora, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah were all barren. And the Gemara tells us they weren't barren by accident. They physically could not have children. And the Gemara tells us the reason why Hashem did that is because Hashem wanted their prayers. Why? Because when a Jew reaches out to God and reaches out understanding that I'm needy and Hashem is the provider of my needs, that's the key to developing a relationship. And oftentimes Hashem will hold back something from a person just so they ask. So sometimes it's an issue of asking. Sometimes, as you say, it's an issue of being meritorious, and changing who you are. Certainly making a life decision to change, certainly doing tshuva or taking on a different behavior, a different path, certainly makes a person more meritorious and can change, but it's not always clear. But one thing's sure, asking works and asking helps. Any other questions, thoughts, observations? One more time, if you're interested, TheShmuz.com, TheShmuz, TheShmuz.com. All the Shmuzim are available online. You can download them, you can listen online. You can also send me an email if you like. And please access that and have a good event. Sure.
Thank you very much.